Okay, girls, let's now have a look at the next step of writing a strong historical paragraph by taking a look not so much at the task beforehand and how you might approach it, but starting to look at what an actual paragraph might look like. As I've said in the previous video, don't be intimidated by the type of paragraph here. I'm trying to model one for you. It's my writing, the way I would write. My use of vocab, my ideas will be sort of different to what you can come up with. But remember, whatever you do, write in third person, past tense, proofread, edit, reference, use terms, and draft again. Know that the process of writing is messy. It's not easy. You might want to pause this, think about some of the language I've used, have a little bit of a read on the screen, or even have a look at the version of it that I've given you in your OneNote. As you do that, you might also want to highlight, as I'm going to do shortly. So the structure of this paragraph is a PEEP, P-E-E-P structure, by which I mean make your point, P for point, then expand, elaborate, explain that point, move into using evidence, and then come back to your point. Now, some teachers will call this a teal structure, where it's topic sentence, explain or use evidence, it doesn't matter the order of those so much, and then link it all back to the question. Or a peel structure, make your point, expand upon it, explain it, perhaps even evidence first in some teachers' cases, and link it back to the question. But I think when it's a standalone paragraph, PEEP is a nice way to go. The second thing I'd like to say before I even do any highlighting on here is make sure that you can see how the E's are interchangeable and they switched back and forth between them. It's not blocks where E is always explain and then one whole chunk is explaining and the next is evidence. They're intermixed. So let's have a little bit of a look at those, firstly by identifying where the point is. Now the point picks up upon the structures of the question. Key words in the question are used. So when we're making our point, what we want to do is make sure we're answering the question. The question was talking about the ancien regime and how it was significant. The social hierarchy was a significant factor in the cause of the revolution. So my opening and closing sentences use some of those same words. They don't have to be exactly the same. And in fact, the two sentences should vary a little bit. After my initial first statement of the point, I want to expand upon it. I want to define some of my terms. So you see I go very quickly into explaining what the ancien regime is. I explain what the king was as an absolute monarch. I then talk about how estates are supported by the king in collecting taxes. I expand and explain points. I then talk about the privileges and responsibilities. These aren't so much in the evidence, even though the evidence connects to them. These blue highlighted points are my ideas, my expansions, my elaborations. You might actually think they're in the sources as well. They can be very clear. Look how the evidence is mixed in. I've got references, I've got quotes, I've got paraphrasing, I've got descriptions of sources. So again, feel free to hit pause anytime here and look at why I might be calling some of those pink type highlights, why I might be calling that using the evidence. Notice in every time I use my evidence, I put an in-text reference. That's extremely important. I can take short quotes. I can take a word here and there. I can take whole sentences. But I always must have an in-text reference done in the correct way. If the in-text reference is from a book, make sure you include the page numbers. Okay? And we'll talk about referencing and how that's done in another video a little bit down the track. But make sure you can see what I've done in this process. And then you can spot each of the sections of a carefully constructed historical paragraph. So I'm going to wrap up here again, and I'll let you pause, look at it as you wish. But remember, we're writing in third person. We're writing in past tense. The process is going to be messy and it's going to take a bit of fiddling around to find just the right words. So we're going to have to proofread afterwards. We're going to have to do a lot of edits. We need to include in-text references. By the way, don't make up things like calling it source 1, source 2, source 3. Use the title of the source, use the author of the source, reference correctly. Use terminology. Talk in the right terms of the language. If it's called an estate, call it an estate rather than a class, most of the time. And then know that the process of writing involves carefully structuring, carefully choosing your words, and drafting. You can't really do this in one hit. So I'm going to leave this video now and let you play with these ideas and perhaps rewatch this video as you're working on your own draft.